What was supposed to be a quiet evening at home became the start of something I never saw coming. Have you ever had one of those moments where everything you believed to be true just crumbles? Like a sudden gust of wind knocking over a house of cards you thought was rock solid. That's exactly how my world flipped upside down last Friday night. It was just a normal evening, or at least it should have been. My wife Emily and I had been keeping things simple. We'd had a silly little spat earlier in the week, something ridiculously minor about me leaving the lights on again. You know the type, the kind of argument you forget about almost as soon as it ends. By that night, I thought we'd moved on, but as it turned out, Emily had a much bigger surprise waiting for me. I was in the kitchen, putting together a late-night snack, when she dropped the bomb. "I'm heading to a party," she said, casually scrolling through her phone. At first, I thought I misheard her. "A party?" I asked, setting down my plate. "What party?" She barely looked up. "Just something with friends," she replied, like it was the most natural thing in the world. And then she added, almost like an afterthought, "Don't wait up." Now, let me explain something about Emily and me. We've always had an understanding. If one of us wanted to go somewhere or do something the other wasn't comfortable with, we'd talk it out first. No secrets, no sudden decisions. But this wasn't a discussion, it was a statement. One delivered with all the tact of a judge reading out a verdict. "Hold on," I said, standing straighter and trying to keep my tone calm. "I thought we agreed that late-night stuff like this wasn't really your thing anymore." She didn't even hesitate. With a shrug that felt way too dismissive, she said, "It's no big deal." And that's when I noticed her outfit. She wasn't dressed for a casual hangout with friends. No sweatpants, no comfy jacket. No, she was wearing that black dress. The one she used to wear years ago when she wanted to turn heads. It hugged her perfectly, paired with heels I couldn't even remember her owning. She looked stunning. Too stunning for a simple night out with friends. I just stood there stunned as she adjusted her lipstick in the hallway mirror. She didn't look at me, didn't even acknowledge the growing tension in the room. She gave herself one last approving glance, like she was preparing to make an entrance at some grand event. Then, without so much as a kiss goodbye, she grabbed her keys and walked out the door. "Don't wait up," she called over her shoulder, her tone light, almost flippant. And then the door clicked shut behind her, leaving me in a silence that felt deafening. I can't even describe how I felt in that moment. Confused? Hurt? Suspicious? Maybe all of the above. There was something about the way she acted that just didn't sit right with me. It wasn't just unusual, it was completely out of character. Or maybe I realized with a sinking feeling it wasn't out of character at all. Maybe this was who she'd been all along, and I was just too blind to see it. That night, the house felt like a tomb. Every little noise, the creak of the floorboards, the hum of the fridge, felt louder, sharper. I tried everything to distract myself. I flipped through channels on the TV, scrolled aimlessly through my phone, even tried reading. But no matter what I did, my mind kept circling back to her. By midnight, I was a wreck. I couldn't sit still, pacing back and forth like a trapped animal. That nagging feeling in my gut wouldn't leave me alone. Something was wrong. Deep down, I knew it. And then, against every promise I'd ever made to myself about trust and boundaries, I gave in. I opened our shared phone account, just for a quick look, I told myself, just to settle my mind. What I found made my stomach drop. A number I didn't recognize stared back at me from the screen over and over again. Dozens of messages, late-night calls, all from the past month. My mind raced. Maybe there was an innocent explanation. Maybe it was a work thing, or a family friend I'd forgotten about. But no matter how much I tried to convince myself, I knew the truth. This wasn't paranoia. This wasn't me overreacting. This was real. I stared at the screen, my eyes glued to the list of calls and texts that seemed to scream at me from the glowing display. That number, over and over again, like it was mocking me. Late-night texts, early morning calls, even during the workday when Emily was supposedly at her job. Maybe it's work-related, I whispered to myself, clinging desperately to some shred of normalcy. Maybe it's a friend I don't know about. But no matter how much I tried to convince myself, the sinking feeling in my stomach was louder than my thoughts. Deep down, I already knew better. By 1:30 a.m., I was still on the couch, my phone clenched tightly in my hand. The house was dark, and the silence pressed down on me like a weight I couldn't shake off. She hadn't called. She hadn't texted. Nothing. My thumb hovered over her contact. I wanted to call her, demand answers, make her explain what was going on. But I froze. My pride stopped me. If she wanted to act like I didn't matter, why should I be the one chasing after her? I wasn't going to beg for scraps of her attention. The hours crawled by, every tick of the clock in the kitchen feeling like a hammer against my chest. And then, just as the first light of dawn started to spill through the blinds, I heard it. The click of heels on the front steps. My breath caught in my throat. The door creaked open, and there she was, Emily. Her hair was slightly disheveled, her makeup smudged just enough to tell me she'd had a long night. She still smelled faintly of her perfume, but there was something else mixed in. Something I couldn't quite place, but it felt wrong. She walked in with a lazy smile, like she had just come back from a relaxing day at the spa instead of being out all night. "Morning," she said lightly, her tone almost sing-song, as if everything was completely normal. I just stared at her. My heart was pounding so hard I thought it might burst, but I didn't say anything right away. I couldn't. I was trying to control the storm of emotions inside me. Anger, hurt, suspicion, all fighting for dominance. Finally, I managed to speak, my words sharper than I intended. "Where the hell were you?" She stopped, blinking for a second, like she hadn't expected me to say anything. Then she rolled her eyes, her expression instantly shifting to annoyance. "Are we really doing this now?" she said, her voice dripping with irritation. "It's way too early for your drama." "Drama?" I shot back, standing up from the couch. My voice trembled slightly, but I forced it to stay steady. "I stayed up all night waiting for you. No calls, no texts. And now you just walk in here like nothing's wrong?" She sighed, brushing past me on her way to the kitchen like I was nothing more than an inconvenient piece of furniture. "I told you I was going to a party," she said dismissively, pouring herself a glass of water. "It's not just about the party, Emily," I said, my voice rising. "It's everything. The late nights, the phone calls, the texts. Who's the guy?" That stopped her. She turned to face me, her expression blank, but there was something behind her eyes. A flicker of hesitation, barely there but enough for me to catch it. "You're paranoid," she said finally, her tone sharper now. "There's no guy." "Don't lie to me, Emily," I said, my voice low and cold. "I checked the phone bill." Her eyes narrowed slightly, her expression hardening into something colder, almost calculating. "You checked my phone bill?" "Yeah, I did," I replied, my voice steady now. "So don't stand there and act like I'm crazy. Who is he?" For a moment the room fell deathly silent. I could hear the clock ticking again, each second feeling like an eternity. I thought maybe she'd finally crack, finally tell me the truth, but instead she laughed. Not a light-hearted, amused laugh. No, this was something darker, bitter, almost cruel. "You know what?" she said, crossing her arms. "It doesn't matter," Emily said sharply, her words cutting through me like a knife. "You've been suffocating me for months, always questioning me, always needing to know where I am. Maybe I needed space. Maybe I needed someone who doesn't treat me like I'm on a leash." My heart pounded as I stepped closer. My hands were shaking, not out of fear, but from pure frustration. "So it's true," I said, my voice tight. "There is someone else." Emily's jaw clenched. For a moment she just stared at me, but then she spoke. "Fine," she said, her voice cold and unfeeling. "You want the truth? His name is Dylan." There. Happy now? Happy? I thought I'd feel some kind of satisfaction, but instead, all I felt was a hollow, icy ache in my chest. "How long?" I asked quietly, barely able to get the words out. Her eyes narrowed, her expression hardening. "Does it really matter?" I looked at her, at the woman I thought I knew, and realized she wasn't even sorry. There was no guilt, no remorse, only annoyance. "Get out," I said, my voice low but steady. She blinked, caught off guard. "What?" "You heard me," I said louder, more forcefully this time. "Get out of my house." For a moment she looked like she might argue, but instead she grabbed her purse, slipped on her heels, and walked to the door. "Fine," she said as she opened it. "But don't expect me to come crawling back. You did this to yourself." The door slammed behind her, and the silence that followed was suffocating. I sank onto the couch, staring at the empty space where she had just stood. For the first time, I wasn't sure if I felt devastated or relieved. The silence wasn't peaceful. It was heavy, oppressive, like the air had been sucked out of the room. Her words echoed in my mind. "You did this to yourself." Really? I did this? She was sneaking around, texting some guy named Dylan at all hours, dressing up like she was going to walk a red carpet, and somehow this was my fault? I wanted to scream, to smash something, but I just sat there frozen. My phone buzzed on the coffee table, snapping me out of my trance. For a second I thought maybe it was Emily, but it wasn't. It was Eric, my best friend. The text read, "You good, man?" I stared at the screen, unsure how to answer. Was I good? Not even close. But I needed to talk to someone. I picked up the phone and called him. He answered on the second ring, his voice groggy. "Hey, Nate, what's up? You okay?" "No," I said flatly. "She's gone." "What do you mean, gone?" Eric Dawes asked, his voice now fully awake and alert. I hesitated, the words catching in my throat before I could force them out. "Emily, she's been cheating on me." The line went silent for a moment, and then Eric let out a low whistle. "Damn, I'm sorry, man. I don't even know what to say." "Yeah, me neither," I said, running a hand through my hair. My voice sounded distant, even to myself. She admitted it, didn't even try to deny it. Then she just left. "Jesus," Eric muttered. "That's cold." "What am I supposed to do?" I asked, though my voice was sharper than I'd intended. "Divorce, obviously. What else can I do?" Eric sighed, his tone softening. "Look, I get it. But don't rush into anything. Take a breath. Let yourself think this through. You don't want to make a decision you'll regret later." "There's nothing to think about, Eric," I snapped, cutting him off. "She cheated. She lied. It's over." "Fair enough," he said quietly after a pause. "Just, if you need anything, you know I'm here." "Thanks," I mumbled, hanging up before he could say anything else. I tossed my phone onto the couch and sat there, staring at it like it was supposed to give me answers. But my thoughts had other plans. Every late-night text, every unexplained absence, every dismissive response, everything she'd done over the past few months was replaying in my head now, crystal clear. It all made sense. She hadn't been trying to find herself or needing space. She'd been finding Dylan. I couldn't stay on that couch a second longer. The walls of the house felt like they were closing in, suffocating me. My eyes landed on her laptop sitting open on the kitchen counter. I hesitated. I hated the idea of snooping. Even after everything, it felt wrong. But at this point, what did I have to lose? With trembling hands, I opened it. No password. Typical Emily, careless and overly confident that I'd never look. I went straight to her email. It didn't take long to find exactly what I was afraid of. The subject line, "Last weekend was amazing." I clicked on it, my stomach twisting into knots. The email was from Dylan, full of flirty inside jokes, plans for their next getaway, and even a picture of the two of them together at a hotel. She looked radiant in the photo, happier than I'd seen her in months. My chest tightened as I scrolled further. This wasn't a fling. This wasn't a mistake. This was an entirely different life she'd been living right under my nose. I slammed the laptop shut, my mind racing, my pulse pounding in my ears. She wasn't just cheating. She was building a future with someone else while leaving me completely in the dark. My phone buzzed again on the counter. I ignored it, unable to tear myself away from the storm of anger swelling inside me. It wasn't just hurt anymore. It was rage, hot, uncontrollable, consuming. I couldn't stay in that house for another second. Grabbing my jacket, I stormed out the door, needing air, space, anything to escape. Before you hear what happened next, make sure to subscribe to the channel. The cool night air hit me like a slap across the face, but it didn't calm the inferno raging inside. My feet moved on their own, carrying me down the dimly lit street. I didn't know where I was going, but my mind was racing far faster than my legs could keep up. Emily and Dylan. The names echoed in my thoughts, louder with each step. He wasn't just a name on a phone bill anymore. He was real. He had a face, a smile, a place in her life that I never even knew existed. How long had I been blind? How long had this been going on right under my nose? The further I walked, the more one thing became painfully clear. There was no fixing this. No amount of talking, no therapy, no apologies could undo what she'd done. She had made her choice, and now I had to make mine. I pulled my phone out of my pocket, staring at the screen. My thumb hovered over Eric's contact for a moment, but then I scrolled down to another name. David, my lawyer. Divorce had always been something that happened to other people. Not me, not us. It had always seemed so distant, so foreign. But now, it was the only option. The line rang twice before David picked up. Nate? This is unexpected. What's going on? I hesitated, the words catching in my throat for a second, before I forced them out. David, I need your help. I need to file for divorce. There was a pause on the other end, then his voice softened. I'm really sorry to hear that. Are you sure about this? Yes, I said firmly. No hesitation this time. She's been cheating on me for months. I have proof. There's nothing left to save. All right, he said after a brief pause. Let's meet tomorrow to go over the details. I'll make sure we get this done as quickly and painlessly as possible. Quick and painless. Funny, those words felt like a cruel joke. There was nothing quick or painless about this. When I got back home, the house felt colder than it had before I left. Her things were everywhere. A jacket slung over the chair, her shoes by the door, the faint scent of her perfume still lingering in the air. It was unbearable. I grabbed a trash bag from the kitchen and started packing. Clothes, makeup, those stupid throw pillows she insisted on buying but never used. It all went into the bag without a second thought. Then I came to the photos. There was one on the mantel from our first vacation together. We were so young, so carefree, smiling like we had the whole world ahead of us. I froze, staring at it, the weight of everything crashing down on me all at once. I stared at the photo for a long moment, my fingers gripping its edges tighter and tighter, before I finally tore it in half. That wasn't us anymore. Whatever we used to be, whatever those smiles meant, it was gone. By the time I was done, the trash bag was full, and the house felt emptier. Not better, not yet. But at least her presence wasn't staring me in the face anymore, mocking me from every corner. I carried the bag out to the trash bin, heaved it inside, and slammed the lid shut. The sound echoed into the quiet night, sharp and final. It felt like the first step toward reclaiming my life. The next morning, I met David at his office. The fluorescent lights buzzed faintly overhead as he spread the paperwork out on the desk in front of me. 7 years of marriage, he said, glancing down at his notes. No kids, a joint mortgage on the house, some shared finances. It's a clean case. Clean, if only it felt that way. Do you want to push for an uncontested divorce? David asked, his tone professional, but calm. It's faster and less expensive if she agrees to the terms. I nodded. Yeah, let's just get it done. He studied me for a moment as if searching for cracks in my resolve, then gave a small nod. All right, I'll get the ball rolling. Expect to hear from her lawyer soon. I signed the preliminary papers, the pen feeling heavy in my hand, like every stroke was chiseling away a part of my life. When I finally walked out of his office, I felt drained, like I had handed over a piece of myself to be sorted, filed, and forgotten. The drive home was a blur. When I pulled into the driveway, the house loomed ahead of me, hollow and unfamiliar, like a stranger's home. I didn't go inside, not yet. Instead, I sat in the car, staring at the steering wheel, trying to picture what my life was supposed to look like now. The answer came quickly. It was a blank slate. Terrifying in its emptiness, yes, but also freeing in its possibilities. Emily had made her choice. Now, it was time for me to make mine. Later that afternoon, as I tried to adjust to the silence that now filled the house, my phone buzzed again. For a moment I considered ignoring it, but curiosity got the better of me. I picked it up and saw a message from Eric. Want to grab a drink? You need it. I stared at the message, debating for a second, before typing back, sure. Same place? 20 minutes later, I was sitting in a dimly lit bar, nursing a glass of whiskey. The warm burn of the liquor did little to dull the ache in my chest, but it was something. Eric showed up not long after, sliding into the seat across from me. His usual easygoing demeanor was gone, replaced with quiet concern. "Man, you look like hell," he said, his voice low. "Feel like it too," I muttered, taking another sip of whiskey. Eric leaned forward, resting his elbows on the table. "So, what's the plan? You really going through with the divorce?" I nodded, my voice flat. "Already started the paperwork." He let out a low whistle, shaking his head. "Damn, I don't blame you, but it's crazy to think this is where things ended up. Tell me about it," I said bitterly, my gaze fixed on the swirling amber liquid in my glass. We sat there in silence for a while, the hum of the bar filling the empty spaces between our words. Finally, Eric broke the silence, his voice cautious. "You ever think about talking to her? Like really laying everything out? Getting some closure?" I shook my head firmly. "Closure? What's the point? She made her choice. She didn't even try to fight for us." Eric nodded slowly, his brow furrowed as he mulled over my response. "Fair enough. But if you ever change your mind, you know where to find her." The conversation stayed with me longer than I cared to admit, lingering in the back of my mind as I went through the motions. The next morning, as I stood in the kitchen making coffee, my phone rang. I almost ignored it. Probably spam or some work call I didn't want to deal with. But then I glanced at the screen, and my heart stopped cold. Emily. Her name stared back at me, the sight of it sending a surge of conflicting emotions through my chest. My finger hovered over the screen. Part of me wanted to let it go straight to voicemail, to ignore her the way she had ignored me for months. But the other part of me, the part that still craved answers, couldn't resist. I picked up, my voice colder than I'd ever heard it. "What do you want?" There was a pause on the other end, long enough that I almost thought she'd hung up. But then I heard her voice, softer than it had been in years. "Nate, can we talk?" I almost laughed, the sound bitter in my throat. "Talk? Now you want to talk? You didn't seem interested in talking when you walked out of here without a second thought." "I know," she said quickly, her words rushing out as if she were afraid I'd hang up. "I screwed up. I know I did, but I just need to explain." "Explain?" I repeated, my voice sharp and cutting. "What's there to explain, Emily? You cheated. You lied. What more is there to say?" Her voice broke slightly, trembling as she spoke. "I need you to understand. Please, can we meet? Just to talk." For a moment I considered slamming the phone down, ending the conversation right there. But there was something in her voice, something raw, almost desperate, that made me pause. "Fine," I said finally, my tone flat, "but this doesn't change anything." "Thank you," she whispered. "I'll text you the place." Later that afternoon, I arrived at the cafe she'd chosen, my chest tight with a mix of anger and nerves. The small, bustling shop felt claustrophobic, every sound amplified as I scanned the room. Emily was already there, sitting at a table by the window. She looked up as I approached, her face a mix of guilt and uncertainty. "Nate?" she started, her voice barely above a whisper. I sat down, crossing my arms, my expression cold. "Start talking." She took a deep breath, her hands trembling as they gripped the edge of the table. "I don't even know where to start," she admitted. "I never meant for things to get this bad. I felt lost, disconnected. And Dylan—" "Don't," I interrupted, my voice like ice. "Don't you dare try to justify this with some sob story about feeling lost. You had a choice, Emily, and you chose him." She flinched, her breath catching at my words, but I didn't stop. "You didn't come to me. You didn't try to fix anything. You didn't fight for us. You just gave up." Tears welled in her eyes, spilling over, but I felt no sympathy. Not anymore. "I'm sorry," Emily whispered, her voice barely audible. "I know I messed up. I know I hurt you, but I still—" "No," I said sharply, cutting her off again. "You don't get to say you're sorry now, not after everything." Her tears spilled over, tracing silent paths down her cheeks, but I didn't waver. "This isn't fixable, Emily," I said firmly, my voice steady. "I've already started the divorce process. This is over." Her face went pale, and for the first time I saw real fear in her eyes. "Divorce?" she asked, her voice trembling. "Yeah," I replied, my tone unrelenting. "Divorce. You made your choice. Now I'm making mine." She stared at me, her mouth opening as if to argue, but no words came out. She just stood there, her hands trembling, as though the reality of her choices was finally sinking in. "I didn't want it to end like this," she whispered, her voice cracking. I shrugged, my expression cold. Neither did I. But here we are. Without another word, she turned and walked out of the cafe, her figure disappearing into the busy street beyond the window. I sat there for a moment, watching her leave, waiting for some kind of wave of emotion to hit me. But there was nothing. Not sadness, not anger, just emptiness. But it wasn't the kind of emptiness that left you hollow. No, this was different. It was clarity. For the first time in months, it felt like something had clicked into place. This wasn't just about her betrayal. It was about me. About how I'd let her lie to me, walk all over me, and make me question my own worth. That ended today. The waitress came by asking if I needed anything else. I shook my head, paid the bill, and stepped out into the crisp afternoon air. Over the next few days, I threw myself into the logistics of divorce. The papers were filed, the accounts were separated, and the process began to move forward. Emily's lawyer reached out to mine, and true to her style, she wanted it to be quick and simple. Good. The faster this ended, the better. The house was still full of memories of her, but every day I worked to erase them. Her things were packed and gone. The photos were boxed up and tucked away. What was once suffocating silence now felt peaceful, like the house was finally mine again. One night, Eric stopped by with a pizza and a six-pack, dropping onto the couch like he always had. "How you holding up?" he asked, taking a swig of his beer. "Better than I thought I would," I admitted, leaning back into the couch. "It's weird, but I feel free." He nodded, chewing thoughtfully. "Yeah, man, sometimes letting go of the wrong person is the best thing you can do for yourself." I glanced at the half-empty bottle in my hand, shaking my head slightly. "Never thought it would come to this," I said quietly. Eric nudged my shoulder with his. "This isn't the end for you," he said with a grin. "It's the start of something new." Weeks turned into months, and slowly I started rebuilding my life. I threw myself into work, picked up running again, and Emily sent a few texts here and there, but I ignored them. Her chapter in my life was closed, and there was no way I was going to reopen it. One night, while I was out with Eric, he nudged me, his voice low but excited. "You see her?" he said, nodding toward the bar. I turned, following his gaze, and spotted a woman with dark hair and a bright smile sitting at the end of the counter. She looked up, caught my eye, and smiled. For the first time in what felt like forever, I felt something stir inside me. "Go talk to her," Eric said with a grin. I hesitated, my nerves getting the better of me for a second. But then I thought, why not? It's funny how life works. A few months ago, I thought my world was ending. I thought Emily's betrayal had broken me, that I'd never feel normal again. But as I sat there, laughing with a woman whose name I'd just learned, I realized something important. Endings aren't just about loss. They're about new beginnings in disguise. Emily had tried to break me, but she hadn't. If anything, she gave me the push I needed to find myself again. And now I was finally ready to move forward. If you enjoyed this story, please subscribe to the channel. Wishing you a great day and the best of luck.